Red Dwarf, Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers by Grant Naylor. Episode 4. 800 million miles from Earth, the mining ship Red Dwarf suffered a nuclear explosion, leaving the ship intact, but killing everyone on board. Everyone, that is, except for Dave Lister, technician 3rd class, and Frankenstein, a cat. When the explosion occurred, Lister was in stasis, and Frankenstein was locked in the hold, giving birth to 4 kittens. Holly, the ship's computer, took over the ship and accelerated out of the solar system until radiation from the explosion had died away, 3 million years later. Then, Holly revived Lister. To keep him company, Holly produced a hologram of Lister's dead bunkmate, Arnold Rimmer. Depressed at the idea of spending the rest of his life with only Rimmer for company, Lister had just decided to go back into stasis when Holly detected something moving on the cargo decks. And it isn't human. Lister clutched the bazookoid, a heavy portable rock-blasting laser, and checked again that the pack on his back was registering full charge. Light flitted through the wire mesh of the rickety lift as it clumsily judded its way down, carrying Lister and Rimmer into the bowels of the ship. 3 miles of lift shaft, over 500 floors. These were the cargo decks, where all the supplies were stored. The tiny exposed cage shuddered and rocked slowly past floor after floor. Down. 20 floors of food, vacuum-sealed tin mountains stretching out beyond vision. Down. Floors of mining equipment, floors of water stored and still in enormous glass tanks, and down. The gloom enveloped them. The light on Lister's mining helmet cut only 20 feet into the darkness. Lister flipped down the helmet's night visor and switched the beam to infrared. Down. Then something strange. These floors were empty. Hundreds of cubic miles of supplies were missing.
It's gone?
What has? Rimmer squinted blindly into the darkness.
All the supplies. The last 10 floors. They were all empty.
Down. In the bottom right-hand corner of Lister's visor, a small green cross began to flicker.
Oh, Smeg. There is something here.
Where? The cross crept up the visor. Lister wanted to say,
the next floor.
But he couldn't. He couldn't speak. The lift coughed to a stop. There it was, stretching before them, 6 miles in length, half-lit and desolate. A huge, impossible city. A city. The lift doors folded open, and they stepped out onto the rough, cobbled street. Crudely fashioned igloo-shaped dwellings lined the roadway, hummocks of carved wood without doorways. Each had only a slit, perhaps a yard wide and less than a foot high, cut 6 feet from the ground. Lister checked the charge on the bazookoid backpack, and they both started cautiously down the street. Before them was a crossroads. The igloo hummocks stretched out in every direction. The flashing cross in Lister's visor throbbed more insistently and indicated they should turn right.
What is this place?
Lister slung the bazookoid over his shoulder and scrambled up one of the hummocks. He poked his head through the slit and peered into the dim interior.
Some kind of house, but it's tiny. Just enough room for 2 people to crouch in and peer out of the gash at the top.
They turned left. More hummocks. Another square, but this time set out like a street cafe. And in the center, a table fully laid with 2 gold candelabra, both lit. A meal, half-eaten, lay steaming on a plate. The blip on Lister's visor was pulsing faster than ever.
It's here.
Lister's finger tightened on the beam button of the bazookoid.
Whatever it is, it's right here.
A pink blur flashed from the top of a hummock, pinning Lister to the floor and sending the weapon scuttering across the cobbles. Rimmer watched, half paralyzed as the pink neon-suited man with immaculate coiffure sniffed Lister, looked up with a puzzled expression, sniffed him more deeply, then finally got to his feet, took out a clothes brush and smoothed out his suit.
"Sorry, man,"
he said.
"I thought you were food."
From the moment he discovered that the cadmium-2 had achieved critical mass, Holly had less than 15 nanoseconds to act. He sealed off as much of the ship as possible, the whole cargo area and the ship's supply bay. Simultaneously, he set the drive computer to accelerate out into the abyss of unknown space. In the hold, Frankenstein's 4 offspring began to breed. Each litter produced an average of 4 kittens 3 times a year. At the end of the first year, the second generation of kittens started to breed too. They also produced 3 litters a year, of 3 to 4 kittens. When Frankenstein died, at the great old age of 14, she left behind 198,732 cats. 198,732 cats who continued to breed. Red Dwarf continued to accelerate. The 40-square-mile cargo hold was seething with cats, a sea of cats sealed from the radiation-poisoned decks above with nowhere to go. Only the smartest, the biggest and the strongest survived. The mutations. The mutations who had rudimentary fingers instead of claws, who stood on their hind legs and clubbed rivals to death with crudely made clubs, who found the best breeding mates and bred. Felis erectus was born. Then there was a plague, and the plague was hunger.
Less than 30 cat tribes now survived, roaming the cargo decks on their hind legs in a desperate search for food. Weak and ailing, they preyed at the silver mountains in their supply hold, huge towering acres of metal rocks which, in their pagan way, the mutant cats believed watched over them. Amid the wailing and the screeching, one cat stood up and held aloft the sacred icon, the icon which had been passed down as holy and one day would make its use known. It was a piece of V-shaped metal with a revolving handle on its head. He took down a silver rock from the silver mountain. He placed the icon on the rim of the rock and turned the handle. And the handle turned, and the rock opened. And inside the rock was alphabeti spaghetti in tomato sauce. God had spoken, and Felis sapiens was born. And there was a war between the cats. It was a holy war.
Some of the cats believed the one true father of catkind was a man called Cloyster, who saved Frankenstein, the Holy Mother, and was frozen in time by the evil men who sought to kill her. One day Cloyster would return to lead them to Birth, the planet where they could make their home. The other cats believed exactly the same thing, except they believed the name of the true father of catkind was a man called Clister. They spent the best part of 2,000 years fighting over this huge, insuperable theological chasm. Millions died. Finally, a truce was called. Commandeering the fleet of shuttles from the docking bay, half the cats flew off in one direction in search of Cloyster and the Promised Planet, and the other half flew off in the opposite direction in search of Clister and the Promised Planet.
Behind them they left the ones who were too weak to travel, the old, the lame, the sick, and the dying. Soon only 2 remained, one a cripple, one an idiot. They snuggled together for warmth and companionship. And one day, to the cripple and the idiot, a son was born. So, the last human being alive, a man who had died, and a creature who'd evolved from cats, listened to a computer with an IQ of 6,000, who couldn't remember who'd knocked Swansea City out of the 1967 FA Cup, explain what the hell was happening.
"So he's a cat," said Lister for the 14th time. The cat took a small portable steam iron out of his pocket and started pressing the sleeve of his jacket. Outwardly, at least, he was human in appearance. There was a slight flattening of his face, his ears were a little higher on his head, and 2 of his gleaming upper teeth hung down longer and sharper than the others, so they peeked whitely over his lips whenever he grinned, which he did a lot. If he'd been a human, you would have described him as vain. He didn't have a name. He found it difficult to understand the idea. He was of the unshakable conviction that he was the absolute center of the entire universe, the reason for its being, and the notion that someone might not know who he was beyond his comprehension.
What about in relationships? Relationships?
The cat rolled the word around on his tongue. The cats had learned English from the vast quantity of video discs and training films that were stored in the cargo decks.
Yeah, between a man-cat and a woman-cat. What do you call each other? Hey, you!
And so the evening progressed. For the most part, details of the cat's background remained obscure. He found the concept of parents bewildering. He couldn't believe there was ever a time he wasn't born. When he put his mind to it, he did recall 2 other cats who used to be around, but most of the time they'd avoided each other. One of them, he reckoned, had probably been his mother, because she wouldn't sleep with him. The cat finally tired of the relentless questioning and announced it was time for his main mid-evening snooze. He casually leapt up on top of Rimmer's locker, curled up in the impossibly small space, and fell immediately into a deep and satisfying sleep.
What are we going to do with him?
Rimmer asked. Lister sat at the table, thinking. Finally, he looked up.
He's coming home with us. Back to Earth.
Disappointment filtered through Rimmer's brittle smile.
You're still going into stasis, then? You're taking him with you?
Why not?
No reason,
he thought.
No reason at all, so long as you don't give 2 short smegs about Arnold J. Rimmer.
I don't want to interrupt your little tete-a-tete, said Holly, but you better come down to the communication suite. We're getting an SOS call.
A huge screen, 100 meters square, hung over the communication consoles, and 4 speakers, each the size of a fairly roomy Kensington bedsit, throbbed gently as Holly tried to establish contact.
It's from an American ship, private charter, called the Nova 5. They've crash-landed. I'm trying to get them on optical. I hope they've got a few spare odds and sods on board. We're a bit short on a few supplies.
Lister sipped his tea.
Like what?
Cow's milk. We ran out of that yonks ago.
What kind of milk are we using now, then?
Emergency backup supply. We're on the dog's milk.
Lister froze. He swallowed.
Dog's milk?
Nothing wrong with dog's milk. Full of goodness. Full of vitamins. Full of marrowbone jelly. Lasts longer than any other kind of milk, dog's milk.
Why?
No bugger will drink it. Plus, of course, the advantage of dog's milk is, when it's gone off, it tastes exactly the same as when it's fresh.
Something's happening!
Rimmer pointed at the comm screen, which fizzled and buzzed with static. Slowly, an image formed. The flat, angular features of a mechanoid face, the head without curves, the mouth without lips.
Thank goodness, bless you,
it said, clapping its hands together.
We were beginning to despair.
Captain Yvette Richards craned forward to look at the spectroscope of the sun they were approaching. It was perfect. She let out a Texan yelp.
Woo! We got it!
Flight Coordinator Elaine Schumann leaned over her shoulder and peered at the console.
It's a supergiant? You betcha,
said Richards, and yelped again.
Time to celebrate,
said Schumann. Crichton, the service mechanoid, handed round styrofoam cups of dehydrated champagne and topped them up with water.
It had taken the crew of Nova 5 6 months to find a blue supergiant, a star teetering on the edge of its final phase in the right quadrant of the right galaxy. Another month, and they would have ruined the whole campaign. Sipping her champagne, Kirsty Fantozzi, the star demolition engineer, started programming the Nebulan missile. It had to explode at just the right moment to trigger off the reaction in the star's core, which would push it into supernova stage. A star in supernova would light up the entire galaxy for over a month, giving off more energy than the Earth's sun could in 10 billion years. It would be a hell of a bang. One undetected bug in Fantozzi's programming could ruin everything. She had to time it so the light from the explosion would reach Earth at exactly the same moment as the light from the other 127 supergiants which were also being induced into supernovae. For anyone living on Earth, the result would be mind-fizzlingly spectacular. 128 stars would appear to go supernova simultaneously, burning with such ferocity they would be visible even in daylight. And the 128 supernovae would spell out a message. And this would be the message.
Coke adds life. For 5 whole weeks, wherever you were on Earth, the huge tattoo would be branded across the day and night skies. The cost of this single 3-word ad in star writing across the universe would amount to the entire military budget of the USA for the whole of history. Pepsi would be buried. Okay, it wasn't wonderful ecologically speaking. Okay, it involved the destruction of 128 stars which otherwise would have lasted another 25 billion years or so. Okay, when the stars exploded, they would gobble up 3 or 4 planets in each of their solar systems. And okay, the resulting radiation would last long past the lifetime of our own planet. But it sure as hell would sell a lot of cans of a certain fizzy drink. Fantozzi finished the program and fired the Nebulon missile off into the heart of the star. Let's turn this son of a goit around and go home. The nose cone of the Nova 5 slowly swung around to begin the jag back to Earth.
The 7 crew members who were in stasis didn't survive the crash. As the ship bellied onto the cratered surface of the ice-clad moon, it caught the edge of a jagged precipice which ripped open the port side like a key in a sardine can, and the stasis E's spewed out into the deadly methane atmosphere. Captain Richards, who'd taken the first 3-month watch along with Schumann and Fantozzi, had been playing solo squash when Crichton dropped into the leisure suite to inform her politely that the ship's steering system had gone all cockamamie and the computer had gone doolally. She'd raced up to the drive room to find chaos. The computer was reciting 15th century French poetry, and the steering system was on fire.
What in hell is happening?
Étoilette, je te vois,
the computer said soothingly. Crichton sprayed the steering system with a portable extinguisher. I don't understand what's going on, Miss Yvette.
Schumann? Fantozzi?
Richards barked into the intercom.
Get up here! We're in deep smeg.
1 minute he was fine. The next he was acting like this.
Richards tore at the panel housing to engage the backup computer.
Nicolette est avec toi. I mean, if I'd known he was going to go mad on us, I wouldn't have bothered cleaning him.
Say what, Crichton?
I mean, what is the point of treating him to a complete spring clean, polishing all his bits and bobs with beeswax, and scrubbing his terminals with soapy water, if he's going to go all peculiar?
You cleaned the computer?
What? Can't you tell? He's absolutely sparkling. Just look inside.
Richards peered into the computer's circuit board casing. Foaming, soapy water bubbled and smoked beneath the gleaming, newly polished innards.
Mamiette le blanc poil,
the computer gurgled and blew soap bubbles out of its voice simulation unit.
Crichton, did you clean the backup computer too?
Crichton looked away modestly.
Did you, Crichton?
Please, Miss Yvette, I don't want thanks.
Did you?
She grabbed him roughly by his shoulders.
The only thanks I need is knowing that you appreciate a job well done.
His lipless mouth twisted into a plastic grin. Schumann burst into the drive room, wearing a towel, rat tails of wet hair bouncing behind her.
What's happening?
Fantozzi raced past her and up to the fizzling flight console. Her eyes darted over the digital readouts. She typed quickly on the old-fashioned 5-button keyboard.
There's no way in.
She tried again.
We can't get manual. The flight console won't let us in.
Well, it should be working 110%. It's even cleaner than the computers.
The Nova 5 dug a 3.5-mile smoking furrow like a giant twisted grin on the icy surface of the moon, and finally came to rest in 2 separate pieces at the bottom of a mountain range. Crichton looked down at his legs. They were 30 feet away, at the other end of the drive room. He dragged his torso over to the body of Yvette Richards. Blood pumped from a gash in her thigh, and her leg was twitching involuntarily. She was breathing. Just. Crichton looked down at the mess of wires that were hanging out of the end of his torso, located one he didn't need very much, yanked it out, and tied it in a tourniquet round the top of her thigh. Richard's eyes blinked open.
Is everyone okay?
Fantozzi was groaning under a pile of debris. Both her legs were broken. Crichton made rudimentary splints out of his hip rods and bound them with wires torn from his midriff. Schumann crawled in from the corridor, her ankle twisted almost backwards.
"Hey, Richards," she grinned. "Nice landing. Remind me never to lend you my car."
Crichton lugged what was left of himself over to Schumann and, without warning, snapped her twisted ankle back into place. She screamed and punched him in the head.
"We've lost the others."
Richards was looking at the security cameras.
"And half the ship. We've still got the stores and the medical unit. And since we're all still breathing, we can assume the atmosphere generator is still operational. I guess Crichton hadn't gotten around to cleaning it yet."
"We'd better get you all down to the medical unit," said Crichton. "Excuse me, Miss Elaine. Would you be so kind as to pass me my legs?"
Lister, Rimmer, and the cat stared at Crichton's angular features on the screen over the communication console.
"I am the service mechanoid aboard the Nova 5. We've had a terrible accident. 7 of the crew died on impact. The only survivors are 3 female officers who were injured but stable."
"Female?"
The cat looked at Lister.
"Is that female, as in soft and squidgy?"
"I am transmitting medical details."
Digitalized pictures of Richards, Schumann, and Fantozzi flashed up on the screen, followed by reams of medical data. The cat's eyes darted across the significant details.
3, all injured and helpless. This is tremendous."
Rimmer turned from the screen and smoothed down his hair.
"Tell them the boys from the Dwarf are on their way, or my name's not Captain A.J. Rimmer, space adventurer."
"Oh, thank you, Captain. Bless you. I'll tell them."
"Captain?" Lister inclined his head forward and looked up at Rimmer through his eyebrows, as if peering over a pair of imaginary spectacles.
"Space adventurer?"
It's good psychology. What am I supposed to say? Fear not, we're the blokes who used to clean the gunk out of the chicken soup machine?
"Hey, Head,"
the cat said to Holly.
"how far are we away?"
"Not far. 28 hours.
"Only 28 hours?"
The cat leapt to his feet.
"I'm first in the shower room. Wow! I'm so excited. All 6 of my nipples are tingling."
"Look, this is a mission of mercy. We're taking an injured crew urgently needed medical supplies. We're not going down the disco on the pull." Disco music thundered out of Lister's 8-speakered portable wax blaster, which vibrated and slid across the metal surface of the sleeping quarters table. He lifted the iron off his best green camouflage pants and pulled them on. He felt air on his buttock, and when he checked in the mirror, he found an iron-shaped hole clean through the right cheek. He rifled through his locker, found the colour he was looking for, and sprayed the exposed buttock with green car touch-up paint. He looked in the mirror again. From a distance, you honestly couldn't tell. He slipped on his favourite London Jets t-shirt and stood back to take in the whole picture. Hey, he knew it wasn't perfection, but God, it was close.
"Oh, you're not on the pull, eh?"
Rimmer stood in the doorway wearing a dashing white officer's uniform, complete with banks of gleaming medals and gold hoops of rank which ran the length of his left arm, which Holly had grudgingly simulated for him.
"You're toffed up to the nines."
"That's rich, coming from someone who looks like Clive of India."
"Oh, it started. I knew it would."
"What has?"
"The put-downs. It's always the same every time we meet women. Put me down to make yourself look good. Just don't do it, okay?"
"How do you want me to act, then? How do you want me to behave?"
"Just show a little respect. For a start, don't call me Rimmer."
"Why not?"
"Because you always hit the rim at the beginning. Rim, Make it sound like a lavatory disinfectant."
"Well, what should I call you?"
"How about the nickname I had at school?"
"What?
Bonehead."
Impossible. Lister couldn't possibly have known his nickname at school was Bonehead. The nickname to which I was referring was Ace.
Your nickname was never Ace.
Maybe Ace Hole.
There you go again. Knock, knock, knock.
Why can't you build me up instead of always putting me down?
For instance?
Well, I don't know. Perhaps if the chance occurs and it comes up naturally in the course of the conversation, you could possibly drop in a mention of the fact that I'm, well, very brave.
Do what?
Don't go crackers, just perhaps when my back's turned you might steer the dialogue round to the fact that I died, and, well, I was pretty gosh darn brave about it.
You're pretty gosh darn out of your smegging tree, Rimmer.
Rimmer arched threateningly close to Lister's face, his eyes bulging. Just don't put me down, okay?
Red Dwarf, Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, was written by Grant Naylor and performed by Chris Barry. Additional music and effects were by Nick Graham. Technical presentation by John Etchells. Produced by Chris Wallace.